Mary has been gracious. And it's the feminine form of John. It's a Jewish name, but it's not clear whether or not her and her husband, it's either Chusa or Huza. Some of the people I listened to pronounced it Huza, and some pronounced it Chusa. It's easier to say Chusa because that's what it looks like. So her husband Chusa. And the only thing in the Bible specifically about Joanna is what's on our Luke 8, 1 through 3, and Luke 24, 1 through 12. But as we go through this, you'll see where the Galilean woman, she and Mary Magdalene, Joanna, and Susanna were known as the Galilean women that followed Jesus everywhere. The rich ladies who financed these fishermen and everything. And I didn't realize it, but Mary Magdalene, according to all the commentaries, was very wealthy. And her wealth came from something about fishing. So maybe she hung around with the fishermen. She was used to them. But she was wealthy, Joanna was very wealthy, and Susanna was wealthy. And they used their own money to support the disciples and Jesus going around. So, and also the thing about Joanna, the commentators all think that that's where Luke, Joanna is the source of a whole lot of what's in Luke's gospel. Because we'll get into it, but there are things talked about that only somebody like in Herod's palace would have known about. And also the intimate details of things about Jesus that are only found in the Gospel of Luke. And it's believed that Mary, mother of Jesus, and Joanna were the people that gave a lot of this information to Luke. And also a guy named Monian, who's talked about in Acts 13:1. He was the stepbrother of Herod Antipas, the one that beheaded John the Baptist, and grew up with him as a child, and they were supposedly best friends, and somehow he got saved and became one of the leaders of the church in Antioch. And some of the commentators thought that maybe it was Joanna that gave him the gospel and how he got saved. And some of the more wild theories were that she also got Herod saved, but I think that's, Herod who killed James, I don't think so. And put Peter in prison and was gonna kill him, I don't think so. But maybe she was the one that got Monian saved, and where he became one of the church leaders in Antioch. They were the leaders in Antioch, sent out Paul and Barnabas on a missionary journey. They said, it's okay for you to go because we have the prophets and leaders here to take care of the church while you're gone. So he was a big deal. All right, also, there's another place that just the two places in Luke that specifically name Joanna, but also there's a reference to her in Romans 16:7, and we'll get to that too. And also the thing that's specific about Luke, that we all know he was a doctor, but he was very precise about everything. And he's also known as the best author of the Gospels. And he wanted eyewitness reports. And that's why they think Mary, mother of Jesus, and Joanna. And they also think that maybe Monian also gave him information, because he was also in the palace with Herod, and being his stepbrother. And it's in Luke 1:1, inasmuch as many have undertaken to compile a narrative of the things that have been accomplished among us, just as those who were from the beginning were eyewitnesses and ministers of the word have delivered them to us. So there's his eyewitness. It seemed good to me also, having followed all things closely for some times past, to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, that you may have certainty concerning the things you have been taught. So Luke was very, very wanting to have eyewitness reports. And we talked about this Theophilus once before, that he may have been his rich patron, that rich people in that time would buy a doctor. You weren't a slave, but you lived with them and you took care of their household. And that may have been who Theophilus was. but he was also obviously a saved person, and he obviously let Luke go with Paul on his journeys. All right, the truth really is, in real life, that nobody knows if Joanna was Jewish or Roman. She could have been either. If Chuza, her husband, was Jewish or Roman. He was the steward of Herod's household, which means he was the financial CEO of all of Herod's dealings. And so one would think he would have been Roman because Romans ruled the place, but commentators say he may have been a very shrewd Jewish person, and so maybe he was Jewish.
What was his name again?
Chuza, C-H-U-Z-A.
It's right there in the scripture.
Yeah, it's in
Okay, got it.
Luke 8:1.
Okay.
Jewish lore says that Joanna was born into a prominent Jewish family in the last years of Caesar Augustus around AD 14. And as a young woman, she was given in marriage to Chuza, who was a member of the Jewish, this lore says, of the Jewish aristocracy. So they're saying they're both Jewish. And he's the one that became the financial officer of Herod's court. Herod was half Jewish, we've talked about this before, but not a practicing Jew. He just was trying to ingratiate the Jews because he was put in this position to try and keep the Romans and the Jewish people the Jewish people were always under rioting and wanting to get out from under Roman rule, and so they installed Caesar Augustus and installed Herod Antipas to try and keep that under control because he thought, because he's half Jewish. Well, the Jews hated him, Herod hated the Jews, and trying to please the Jews, he built this massive palace where we think Joanna and Chuza resided, at least prior to the time she left and went with Jesus. And it was built in Tiberias, and he built it on top of a Jewish cemetery. Just not real bright man. Just like his father Herod the Great had put pagan statues into the temple, so they were hated by the Jewish people. And back to Joanna, they think if it was true she grew up in a Jewish family, then she probably went to Jerusalem at Passover, and presumably that would have been when she was getting older, the time when Jesus started his ministry, but that's all speculation. So the first where it really talks about her, where is in Luke 8:1-3. And it says, Luke 8:1-3. Soon afterward, he went on through cities and villages, proclaiming and bringing the good news of the kingdom of God. And the 12 were with him. So the 12 disciples, and also some women who had been healed of evil spirits and infirmities. Mary called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had gone out, and Joanna, the wife of Chuza, not Chuza, I put an R in there all the time, Chuza, Herod's household manager, and Susanna, and many others who provided for them out of their means. So there were women with Jesus all the time, and and as we go on, Jesus allowed the women to be the first to witness the resurrection, which means how he honored women and how he valued women. And part of the reason too that there needed to be women with him as well as men is because they were trying to attract women believers. And it was easier to attract women believers if there was women with them. But it's interesting that, okay, these rich women they lived in palaces, they lived lives of ease, and now they're going around in these filthy places with these illiterate fishermen, and probably at the beginning at least were a little bit crude, because as fishermen can be, but as everybody can be, and probably became more, as we see the writings of these fishermen, Peter and John, how much that they matured and became so fluent. But anyway, being used to living in a palace, and now you're walking among all these poor, filthy people, and don't know where you're gonna sleep the next night maybe don't know if you're gonna have a meal for the next day. Even though they had food, they had to find the food. And it wasn't just the women that cooked the food and, made the places for. You remember in the feeding of the 5,000, Jesus told the disciples to go find food for these people. He didn't tell the women, you better go, you're women, go find the food. Jesus told the men that they should find food. And that was presumably how they operated. They shared duties. It wasn't just the women that did womanly duties. The women were sitting at Jesus' feet listening to him. And these women were with him until he was resurrected and after his resurrection, because they were with him during the 40 days when he was still on earth. And so they knew him intimately.
Missionaries.
Yeah, that's right. That's what they called Joanna the first missionary, because they were the ones that saw the resurrection, and that Jesus allowed women to do that honored women in such a way. So, supposedly in the Lord, she grew up believing in the God of the Jews, and so whether that's true or not, or whether she was converted, other stories said that she was married because the Tiberias was kind of a small city, and the rich people all knew each other, presumably, and so she probably knew Susanna and Mary Magdalene, and it was maybe them that came to the palace and saw her and told her or brought her to Jesus. But the reason they think she went to Jesus, because as it says here, that there were women who had been healed of evil spirits and infirmities. They don't know if Joanna had evil spirits or she had some sort of physical illness, but obviously in the palace she probably would have had the best doctors in the area. They were there to take care of Herod and Herod's family and the rich people, and obviously they could not heal Joanna, and it must have been something that was pretty bad. And also during that time, a lot of the healing was done by spiritual people, like shamans, because they thought that illnesses came from evil spirits. It wasn't from bacteria or anything else, it was from evil spirits. And some of them went so far, I read, that they would drill holes in the sick people's heads to let the evil spirits out. I don't know if it killed them or, the evil spirits came out. But obviously, really, to release the spirit. So obviously, though, she wasn't able to have somebody in the palace to cure her. So I don't know if Mary Magdalene led her to Jesus, or she could go slip in and out of the palace. She was rich, she was articulate, she could go. But it seems if Herod had found out what she was doing, there could have been trouble for both her and her husband. It's unclear how ultimately she left completely and went to follow Jesus, because she was with Jesus all the time. And presumably she didn't go back to the palace. Once she left and went with Jesus, she did not go back to the palace. And it's not clear if Chusa was with her, if he got fired, if he got killed, what happened. But she didn't go back to the palace. And in the situation she was in danger with Herod being as nutty as Herod was, and the fact that he hated Jesus. He didn't hate Jesus at first. He was fascinated by Jesus and wanted to see him perform miracles. But when Jesus wouldn't talk to him, he started hating Jesus too, and he obviously didn't like John. Well, he liked John the Baptist, but Herodias got him to behead John. So, and the other thing, and if you watch The Chosen, which I love The Chosen, where Joanna would go see John in prison. And so she may have, because he was in the palace, and she could go around the palace, and she could have gone, and maybe it was John that persuaded her to be a believer. It's hard to tell, but she was presumably there when the whole beheading thing occurred, because Chusa would have been right beside, his place was beside Herod's throne, and so he would have seen what's going on, and generally, the curious woman would have been right beside him, so she could have seen what actually happened. And another legend had it, not necessarily this is, that when after Herodias threw John the Baptist's head in the dung pile, she picked it out and gave it a burial on the Mount of Olives, a good burial on the Mount of Olives. And during the time of Constantine the Great, supposedly, this is all supposed, they found his head.
Oh.
Another legend has that his head is underneath a synagogue in Damascus, Syria. It's all speculation. He's in heaven with his head now. So. Yeah. Right. And she would have been able to do it because she would have seen what was going on. Also, in the commentators said that the women's group, because as it says, there were many other women who followed Jesus. It just wasn't these three, and probably other wealthy women that gave of their monies, because this was like kind of the beginning of the New Testament church where everybody shared. And so they kind of started all that. But that they were the three leaders in order. Mary Magdalene, Joanna, and Susanna were like Peter, James, and John with the men. They were the equivalent, women equivalent. They were the leaders. And
Now, do you think they just spoke to the women, or did they speak to men and women?
based upon how, probably mostly to the women, I don't know, but probably mostly to the women, but based on how egalitarian Jesus was, they probably could have spoken to anybody. Because it was a shame. I mean, think about it. They're running around, these rich women are running around with these ragtag fishermen all over the place. I mean, it must have been like, you know, what is going on? So, I mean, based on that, they could probably talk to anybody, but I would assume since they said they wanted, you know, women for women and men for men, that they basically spoke with the women. But that's another, you know,
Plus
just,
the money, if they were rich with her husband had to know what was going on, or in,
that, okay,
you know,
but there
what's
was
her money?
there was an article I read that, how'd she get away with this?
Yeah, with the money.
Okay, there's a bunch of theories. Number one, that presumably everybody said this was her own money. This wasn't Chusa's money. This was her own money, and she either got it through inheritance, or they got divorced and she got a good settlement. If he died and she got his money through dying, or that he went along with this too. Because one of the stories said that he was the one that took her to Jesus for healing, because he was so, you know, concerned about whatever illness she had. But or that it was that not her money, that was an allowance, but they said presumably there wasn't enough of a, you know, allowance wouldn't have financed what was going on here. And the divorce thing, they said, could have been real because he had reasons for divorce from her basically abandoning him. She went off with Jesus. It didn't matter that you're with the Messiah, you abandoned your husband. So, but it doesn't say, there's no indication that they divorced. And, you know, maybe maybe she got away and Herod killed Chusa. It's not clear. It's not clear. Oh, and how she died. That's interesting. And when we get to Romans, she was presumably in jail. And one of the legends said that she went to Rome and she got imprisoned in Rome. And a Roman soldier came to the prison and gave her choice. She could either get beheaded or strangled. So she took strangling.
Oh
Strangled and killed.
I don't like it.
Right, but either choice, not so good. Legend also says that she joined Jesus in 31 AD. Who knows? This is all stuff that, you know, that just when doing the research. Joanna is only mentioned by name in Luke. The other Gospels say Galilean women, but they never say her name. Basically, they only say Mary Magdalene and all the other, Mary, mother of James and Joseph, and Mary, wife of Cleophas, you know, but they never say Joanna by name. But they say Galilean women, and that's who everybody knew, that those were the major Galilean women. Also, the reason that they think that she's such a good source for Luke seemed to have a fascination with Herod, because he talks about Herod more than any of the other gospel writers. But it's interesting, he refers to Herod saying that he thought that Jesus was John coming back from the dead because he beheaded him, but he doesn't give the incident. He only refers to it, but he doesn't give the actual incident where Salome danced and all that. It's not in Luke, which is an interesting thing. And also that 9 times he refers to Luke in the gospel, while all the other gospels to Herod. He refers to Herod 9 times. All the other gospels never refer to him any more than 4 times. And they think is more proof that he had the inside information from Joanna. So where did Joanna get her money? And why didn't she and Chusa get killed by Herod? We just talked about that. It could have been a dowry, because remember, dowries were yours. And it could have been inheritances, because after the whole Zelophehad daughters, you could get inheritances, and could have been an allowance. Don't know. But she obviously had plenty of it. So.
But she didn't have any son or.
Don't know. That's another thing. Don't know if she, good point. Don't know if she had children. Doesn't say anything about it, It would seem to me if she had children, but they, and it could have been that she had children like the disciples. They would go back, Peter would go back to his wife and mother-in-law, and presumably we don't know if any of the other disciples were married. Peter's the only one we know about that was actually married. They all could have been married. But presumably they would go back to their families. So maybe she did. Maybe she had a family. Maybe Chusa had the kids in the palace. But who knows? But it's stranger that a woman would leave her family than Peter. But who knows? When you're following Jesus. So, all right. The next time that actually speaks about Joanna is Luke 24, 1 through 12, at the resurrection. It actually gives her name, but go back to 23, chapter 23, obviously right before 24, and chapter 23, verse 27 at the crucifixion. And there followed him, Jesus, a great multitude of the people and of women who were mourning and lamenting for him. So here's the women following Jesus at the crucifixion who stayed when the disciples fled. Although one of the commentators said maybe Lazarus didn't flee, that maybe Lazarus stayed with the women. But speculation. All right, and then 23:49. All his acquaintances and the women who had followed him from Galilee stood at a distance watching these things. That doesn't say names, but women from Galilee would indicate Joanna, Susanna, and Mary Magdalene. And Mary Magdalene is named almost everywhere, for sure. And then 23, 55, and 56. The women who had come with him from Galilee followed and saw the tomb and how his body was laid. Then they returned and prepared spices and ointments. So Joanna came back with the spices and ointments. So once again, that in all probability doesn't name her, but refers to her. So then, now we're going to get to the real referring of her. 24, Luke 24. But at the first day of the week, at early dawn, they went to the tomb, taking the spices they had prepared. And they found the stone rolled away from the tomb. But when they went in, they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus. While they were perplexed about this, behold, 2 men stood by them in dazzling apparel. And as they were frightened and bowed their faces to the ground, the men said, "Why do you seek the living among the dead? He is not here, but he is risen. Remember how he told you while he was still in Galilee." Told you. And I'll go back to the 2 places where Jesus tells it says disciples, so the women were obviously part of when they say disciples. It isn't, we're just not talking about the 12. We're talking about also these women. Remember how he told you when he was still in Galilee that the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men and be crucified and on the third day rise. And they remembered his words, and returning from the tomb, they told all these things to the 11, minus Judas the traitor, and all the rest. Now it was Mary Magdalene and Joanna and Mary the mother of James and the other women with them who told these things to the apostles. But these words seemed to them like idle tale, and they did not believe them. Contrast the women to the men. The women went to the tomb first, and Jesus allowed them to be the ones to know about the resurrection first, to be the first missionaries to tell the gospel. They go to, and all these women, it isn't just, Mary Magdalene going and tell them, and the disciples who heard everything Jesus said didn't believe him. They thought it was nonsense. And where Jesus told them, first of all, look at here, when they found the stone rolled away, blah, 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 and they saw the angels, and as they were frightened and bowed their faces to the ground, what did the angels tell them, like he told John in Revelation? Don't bow to me, I'm just like you. In Revelation 19:10, that's where John's bowing down to the angel, because the angel appears, and the angel said to me, write this, blessed are those who are invited to the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he said to me, these are the true words of God. Then I fell down at his feet to worship him. But he said to me, you must not do that. I am a fellow servant with you and your brothers who hold to the testimony of Jesus. Worship God. So it's interesting, the angels didn't tell them not to bow. Don't know why, just another, little interesting tidbit. And then back to Luke 9:18 to 22 is where Jesus told them all what was going to happen to him. The disciples, and obviously the women were there. Luke 9:18 to 22. Luke 9, that's when, that's 18, we should start at 21, not 18, because that's when Jesus asked Peter, who the crowd say I am, for once Peter's on top of it. He says, you are the Christ. But 21, Jesus foretells, 9:21, and he strictly charged and commanded them to tell this to no one, saying, the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and scribes and be killed, on the third day be raised. Normally when we read this stuff, we just presume he's talking to the 12, but he was obviously talking maybe to even more than the women, but he was at least talking to these inner circle women, because the angels say, remember what he told you? And also on Luke 9, same chapter, 43 to 45. But while they were all marveling at everything he was doing, Jesus said to the disciples, let these words sink into your ears. The Son of Man is about to be delivered into the hands of men. But they did not understand the saying, and it was concealed from them, so that they might not perceive it. And they were afraid to ask him about this saying. Once again, it seems like, okay, he's talking to his 12 guys. He was talking to the women too. Otherwise, the angels would not have said that to them. So, Matthew and Mark don't mention Joanna by name, but they talk about the Galilean women. And Matthew 23, 27, 23, 27, Matthew 23, 27. Why did I not mark that? Matthew 23:27, it says. That's not right. Sorry, that's not right. It's not Matthew. Must be 24. I guess that's not, okay, they just, they're referred to, they don't refer to Joanna by name, but the three were known as the Galilean women. Oh, it's Matthew 27, I had it the wrong way. 27, Matthew 27, 23, hopefully here. Nope, not 23, forget that, I don't know what happened there, but 49.
What happened?
I don't know, I got dyslexic, I guess, I didn't even, all right, hopefully 49 has it, okay.
Where are we now, this?
Matthew 27, nope, that's
No,
what it
it's not
is.
that one.
27:55 to 56, I'm pretty sure that is right. They were, oh, okay, that one's right. Yes. Matthew 27:55 to 56. There were also many women there looking on from a distance. This is at the crucifixion. There were many women there looking on from a distance who had followed Jesus from Galilee, ministering to him. Once again, they don't say Joanna, but it is, they're the Galilean women. Among whom were Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of the sons of Zebedee. All right, they name those, but they're the Galilean women, so presumably Joanna and Susanna were also there. And Matthew 28:1, they're talking about the resurrection again. Now after the Sabbath, toward the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. So once again, each of the Gospels gives different people. John only talks about Mary Magdalene too. And Mark talks about Mary Magdalene and the Galilean women, but does not name Joanna or Susanna. In Mark 15, let's see if that's right. Mark 15, 40 to 41. There were also women, this is at the crucifixion, there were also women looking on from a distance, among whom were Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of James the younger, and Josie and Salome. When he was in Galilee, they followed him and ministered to him, and there were also many other women who came up with him to Jerusalem. That's presumably Joanna, Susanna, and lots of other women. It wasn't just those three, there were lots of women that followed Jesus. And keep on going, 16, Mark 16:1. When the Sabbath was passed, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome brought spices so they might go and anoint him. And early on the first day of the week, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. So, why is it different accounts? It's because we have different people telling the story too, whose target people are different. But Mary Magdalene obviously was there because she's also in John, where John talks about only Mary Magdalene being there. But the other women and the Galilean women, and so that included Joanna and Susanna. And other women obviously too, but Joanna and Susanna, like we said, were the leaders of the pack. This also shows with these women, the other thing that a lot of the stereotypes of Jesus, he has all these poor, illiterate, ragtag people following him, that nobody that had any intelligence or any education would go after him, because it was his message was so far out, but that's not true. Here are these wealthy women, presumably a whole lot more of them, wealthy men and women that sponsored Jesus. And that stereotype just isn't true. And also you see by this, Jesus treated women as equals. All this stuff about Christianity is anti-woman, that's a lie. Jesus maybe treated them better than men because the men were so thick-headed. Nobody heard that. They did, the women did do a lot of women's work for them, but they also, the men did too. It wasn't, Jesus wasn't saying, okay, you're women, you give me your money and you cook. No, they were equal with the men and heard everything. Obviously, they heard everything, even the inner circle of things that Jesus, I mean, they didn't get to go to the Mount of Transfiguration, but the inner circle things that were going on, obviously, they heard a whole lot. And one of the commentators said that Joanna remained faithful like Mary Magdalene and Susanna to the end, because in Luke 10, go to Luke 10, this 10:1, this is the sending out of the 72. Remember, Jesus sent out the 12 first, and they came back and all they said, oh, it was a good time. Now, on Luke 10, it obviously wasn't everything that Jesus wanted to happen. So in Luke 10:1, it says, after this, after the disciples had sent the first round, the 12 didn't do so hot. After 10:1, after this, the Lord appointed 72 others and sent them out on ahead of him, 2 by 2, into every town and place where he himself was about to go. This presumes that there were women that were in part of this 72. Because they were the inner circle. Why wouldn't you send them, women? Joanna, Susanna, and Mary Magdalene knew everything that was going on, and presumably a whole lot of other women. It just doesn't say, he sent out 72 of his male disciples. This is presuming that she probably, all of Mary Magdalene, the whole crew probably went out. And in 17, the 72 returned with joy, saying, Lord, even the demons are subject to us in your name. So they were more successful, so they probably were women. But the commentators say, that's never brought up, but she and these other women probably were part of that 72. They just never get the right accolades. Then, because she was in the inner circle and stayed around when Jesus was being crucified, like the male disciples didn't, and was the first one to see the resurrection and to give notice of the resurrection, it was presumed that she was welcomed into the inner circle. I think all three of those for sure, Mary Magdalene, Joanna, and Susanna were welcomed into the inner circle because they'd been there all the time. They saw everything. They believed. They, helped other women be believers. So they were probably welcomed in from even after Jesus during the 40 days and everything, and after he arose. That presumably these women were still hanging around with the male disciples, and in Acts 1. Go to Acts 1. Acts 1, 12 to 14. Then they returned to Jerusalem from the mount called Olivet, which is near Jerusalem, on a Sabbath day's journey away. And when they had entered, they went up to the upper room where they were staying, and presumably the upper room was the home of Mark's mother. I read that somewhere, but speculation, just interesting tidbit. And when they entered, they went up to the upper room where they were staying. Peter and John and James and Andrew, Philip and Thomas, Bartholomew and Matthew, James the son of Alphaeus, and Simon the Zealot, and Judas the son of James. Not the traitor Judas. All these were with one accord, were devoting themselves to prayer, together with the women, presumably Susanna, Joanna, and Mary Magdalene, and Mary, the mother of Jesus, and his brothers. Because by this time, too, Mary, mother of Jesus, probably knew these women really well. They were probably really good friends of what they'd been through together. So there's no reason to presume that at this point they were no longer with the disciples. They were the crowd. They were the in crowd. So presumably they were there. And also, all right, in Acts, did we do Acts 13:1 about Women? Yeah, oh, I talked about it, but go to Acts 13:1. Now, there were in the church at Antioch, and that was one of the first churches where the people were first called Christians, remember that, at Antioch? Now, there were in the church at Antioch prophets and teachers, Barnabas, Simeon, who was called Niger, Lucius of Cyrene, Manaen, a lifelong friend of Herod the Tetrarch, and Saul. While they were worshiping the Lord and fasting, the Holy Spirit said, "Set apart for me Barnabas and Saul for the work for which I have called them." Then after fasting and praying, they laid their hands on them and sent them off. So there was Manaen that Herod, that's amazing. His stepbrother, foster brother, whatever he was, that then became one of the church leaders in Antioch. All right. Finally, where it may or may not be a reference to Joanna, go to Romans 16:7. This is Paul now, obviously, it's in Romans. Romans 16:7. And this is personal greetings. You know how Paul starts or ends or both his writings with personal greetings to separate people. And it says in 7, "Greet Andronicus and Junia, my kinsmen and fellow prisoners. They are well known to the apostles and were in Christ before me." All right, Junia is the, I gotta get this right, Roman name for Joanna. So a lot of the commentators think this was Joanna that was in prison. And that's where I think they also get where she got imprisoned in Rome and ultimately got killed. And my kinsmen and fellow prisoners, kinsmen meant, fellow Jewish people, so presuming she was Jewish. And they are well known to the apostles. She was well known to the apostles. She was actually an apostle because to be apostle you had to see Jesus and know Jesus. And they were in Christ before me. Paul wasn't converted presumably until 5 years after the crucifixion. So Joanna was a believer long before him. So she was in Christ before him. Okay, so who would know that until you study this stuff? And another thing that studied said about Chusa, or Huza, however you say it, they think that it's possible that he was the Roman official in John 4. So go to John 4, 46 to 54. I'm taking you all over the place, I know, but these are easy ones, the beginning of the New Testament. John 4, 46 to 54. John 4, 46 to 54. Jesus heals an official son. John 4, 46 to 54. So he came again to Cana in Galilee, his favorite hangout, Galilee, where he had made the water wine. And at Capernaum, there was an official whose son was ill. When this man heard that Jesus had come from Judea to Galilee, he went to him and asked him to come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. So Jesus said, "Unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe." The official said to him, "Sir, come down before my child dies." Jesus said to him, "Go, your son will live." The man believed that word Jesus spoke to him and went on his way. As he was going down, his servants met him and told him that his son was recovering. So he asked them the hour when he had begun to get better, and they said to him, "Yesterday at the 7th hour the fever left him." The father knew that was the hour when Jesus had said to him, "Your son will live." and he himself believed and all his household. And the commentary says this made sense because Joanna would have been of his household, so maybe that's where they both became believers. But it's all speculation, but he's an official, he's a Roman official, and he would have been called an official at being working in Herod's palace. So,
You're talking about Joanna's husband?
yes, choose.
Okay.
Yeah, that they think that he may have been the official that Jesus healed the son. So if that's true, she did have a son. And that his whole house believed, and maybe that's when Joanna became a believer. But it's all speculation, nobody knows for sure. The only thing that's absolutely sure is the two places that they talk about her, and maybe the Romans where they talk about her, and when they refer to the Galilean women. Because she was a Galilean woman and she followed him, you know, from the time she was converted, from whatever her illness was, till whenever she finally was killed. So, let me see if there's anything else. Are there any questions or comments or?
Nothing more about Susanna? Just all Joanna?
She what?
Nothing more about Susanna?
Susanna, I couldn't find any much speculation about her. She was rich, and she was supposedly a friend of Mary Magdalene and Joanna, but cause I was gonna do a little blurb on her, but I couldn't find hardly anything about her, and there weren't any sermons, cause Joanna had a whole bunch of sermons that they'd done, different people did on her, little YouTube things. So there was a whole bunch, I couldn't find anything. I mean, very little. Let me see. Oh, Woman of the World, Joanna and Susanna. It says, okay. Joanna and Susanna had been healed by Christ, and they showed their gratitude and love by supporting him. Don't know what they were healed of again, but it seems to imply that evil spirits. And some of the commentators say when the Bible says evil spirits, it doesn't necessarily mean demons. It just means they were ill. I see evil spirits. I think evil spirits, but and you gotta watch with these commentators. One of them said Susanna was the sister of Jesus.
Was it
Yeah,
what?
yeah. I go, sister of Jesus.
Well, he did have sisters.
Yeah, but not Susanna. She was Chusa's wife, and I don't think so.
What?
Susanna.
He just said Susanna.
Yes.
Yes, Joanna.
Oh, right. No, Susanna. You're right. I did mean Susanna. They said whoever where I was reading said Susanna was Jesus' sister, because she was rich. Jesus didn't come from a
That's
rich
true.
family, so.
That's true.
So,
They never mention his sisters, but they do mention his brothers.
right, they give the names of the brothers, but not of the sisters. Right, but that's not Jesus, that was the writer.
Well, also, I was reading in Job, Job had 3 daughters and he gave the inheritance to them.
Yes,
And that was way before
right,
the other ones,
Right.
so.
right. Well, I don't know, cause it's unclear what cause I've heard
I don't
Job
know
was
how
the
they
first
find
book of the Bible,
If
but,
it's not in there, how they find what they did find.
right. Well, they
Church
find
fathers.
like in digs and stuff, they find inscriptions on things and like
Josephus and.
right, Josephus, although Josephus can be a little shaky at times too. Most of the time he's okay, but there's a point where he had gotten out of favor, and so he was kind of doing his writings to get back in favor with the Romans, so, you gotta be careful with that too.
Was Tertullius another one of those
Yeah,
writers?
yeah. And the scrolls, what are they called, where they found? Dead Sea Scrolls, that had a bunch of stuff in it too, and they're finding stuff all the time.
Well, when I was in Ephesus a
Yes,
few years ago,
Yes,
there's still, and the little guide that we had said only 20% of Ephesus had been,
excavated. So you'll find lots of
and,
stuff.
yeah, they were still, they had little sections
Yeah, and all
marked
those
off.
Dead Sea Scrolls, you don't even know what hardly any of them say.
Say what?
All the extra Dead Sea Scrolls they found in the metallic ones, I forgot what the copper ones. They're still trying to figure out what
Right,
they
they're
say.
trying to
So they don't even
determine-
know half of what
Right, what is, and what
most of
are,
them say. And
they're in, part of them are in a museum in Jerusalem. I saw some, what differences, they couldn't put anything in front of them because they're falling, whatever, but they're there, some of them, not all, because they're working on them, you know, and they have to be so careful, so, because they're so delicate. All right, back to, Joanna and Susanna were women who had healed in Jesus and showed their gratitude and love by supporting him. Joanna was a courageous disciple of Jesus the Christ. Susanna's relations are not mentioned, but we do know that Joanna was married to Chusa. Joanna and Susanna spread the good news of Jesus' resurrection. And that's all I found out about Susanna, unfortunately. So, it's interesting though that no even speculation like they do about everybody else. Maybe if I, kept going and going, I could have found something, but. Oh, where do we see Susanna in the New Testament? Luke 8, 1-3. What does the Bible tell us about Susanna's connection to Jesus? She was a follower of Jesus and left her home to travel with him and the apostles. We don't know if she was married. But, they all married so young, so presumably they were married, don't know. Another presumption, and I had a boss that said, never presume anything, which is pretty true. Due to the description preceding the names of Mary, Joanna, and Susanna, we understand Jesus healed Susanna either of evil spirits or an infirmity. She was a woman of some wealth, able to help provide for them, Jesus and the apostles, out of her means. Jesus accepted her company among them and her support. She and another woman kept Jesus and his apostles from unnecessary concern about provisions. To say Jesus was unusual in this culture is an understatement, for he not only spoke to women, but also welcomed them in his formal and informal environments, in public proclamations and in familiar settings such as with Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. Rabbis weren't known to deign to take the time to teach women, but Jesus did. He didn't subscribe to the traditions of men, and he faced the ire of the Jewish leaders for his kindness to and affirmation of women. We don't know of Susanna's family except she was Jewish. We do know she willingly joined and was identified with Jesus, his apostles, and other women who served the Lord. She and the other woman had more in common than their ethnicity and heritage. The Lord Jesus had redeemed them all. We can assume they gave sacrificially to Jesus' work and ministry. So that's all I can find about her. But, so, but you could write something. A lot of these people seem to just write something and say, well, like John the Baptist had in Damascus, Syria, yeah, right, sure, that they found it, but, and that Joanna was choked to death by a Roman soldier. It's interesting, but is it true? You don't know. But the only thing you absolutely know is true is what's in this. That's all. And maybe some snippets from Josephus if they coordinate, align with the Bible. But very interesting woman, and the fact that she would leave her wealth and where she was, not only leaving the wealth, but leaving, danger. That she could have been in real danger, and put her husband and possible kids in real danger too. So it leads me to believe either he went along with it or he went with her. Although you think they'd say, the Bible would say, Joanna and her husband Chusa, stayed with Jesus.
Yeah, because they do say husband and wife.
Right.
Yeah.
Like
Priscilla
and Aquila, yeah. And the ones that got it in the New Testament.
Yeah.
So, but yes.
I guess she got divorced because she got out of that spirit of sickness,
Right.
and she got with a monument.
And some of the commentators said maybe Herod gave her the money, because he felt felt guilty about what he'd done to John the Baptist, that he became a believer. That's baloney, because like I said, he killed James, James, Peter, James, and John. James got it. He tried to get Peter, but Peter's, the angel got him out of jail. So, no, I don't think so. And he was so paranoid anyway.
And self-centered,
Right, so, killed his wife, killed his son. Do you think he's gonna spare him? I don't think so. So,
He was on a killing spree.
right, his life was a killing spree. So, all right, any other questions or comments? Always have good comments and
When
good
is
questions.
this, class gonna end?
Oh, next week, no class. It's, we're on, okay, let me see. 21st? I think it's a week. You mean, April?
21st of March, there's no.
No, yeah, next week, no class, cause that's when I go to San Antonio to see Carrie's graduating.
Oh my gosh.
Let me see, so we're at
to dogs.
4.
Yes, I do.
So there's 3
I take
more,
her to the airport.
After the 21st, there's 3 more?
yes. There's 5, there's Tamar 1, the daughter-in-law of Judah. And Susanna meant Lilia Rose, I didn't say that.
Oh, yeah.
So when is it ending, the 18th? April 18th?
All right, next week, no, then there's 3 more, what are those? Is there a last week in March then? Yeah, cause there's 20,
Tamar, Drusilla, and Tamar too.
yeah, so we have one after, not next week, but the next week, it's still a week in March, correct?
28th.
Yeah.
Right, and then 2 more, so what's April?
4th and 11th.
4th and 11th, so it's over on April 11th. So we, Tamar 1, Judah, wife of Judah, daughter-in-law of Judah, well, kind of a wife in the end. Drusilla, ooh, and Bernice.